Good morning. It's Tuesday, 15th April 2025. And of course, it's my delight to welcome you to the continuation of your current affairs program, TMI, coming to you live from our Lagos Network studios on the ITV network. I am Joshua Okata, and of course, I'm being joined by my co-anchor, Charity. Good morning, Charity.
Good morning, Joshua. Good to see you.
Thank you.
And Nigerians, welcome to the Lagos studio for the program.
All right. It's 15th of April, as I said, and of course, on the show today, it would be the state of the nation, of course, with regards to a plethora of issues associating the U.S. court reopening a case against President Bola Ahmed Tinubu. And of course, we'll be looking at the responses from the presidency right here in Nigeria. You might also ask, why at such a time would the records of Bola Ahmed Tinubu be released? Could it be for political reasons? Of what damaging impact would this have on President Bola Ahmed Tinubu if actually he was convicted of such crime as alleged? And of course, consider the fact that being the image maker, the number one image maker of Nigeria, and of course, to the extent where Nigeria might be pronounced as a narco state if this happens to be the case. Well, these are some of the issues that would make or form the basis of our roundtable discourse on the show this morning. And of course, we are being joined by a couple of gentlemen, one of which is joining us virtually in the person of David Honde. He is an investigative reporter. David, good morning to you, and thank you so much for joining us.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
And of course, we're being joined by a legal professional in the person of Mr. Jide Ologun. He is a legal practitioner and, of course, a public affairs analyst. Good morning, Mr. Jide, and thank you so much for joining us.
It's my pleasure. Thank you.
All right, now let's get the ball rolling. But before we delve into the crux of the matter, I will be asking David. David, my question to you would be, it's already in public notice, without flattering you, that you and alongside an American in the person of Aaron Greenspan actually co-owned the lawsuit. And of course, you funded it quite a while, especially during the period of June 2023 under the Freedom Information Act, FOI, against several U.S. agencies. At that point in time, many Nigerians wished you well, especially considering the fact that he who occupies such lofty office, I'm talking about the office of the president, should reflect the values that such office exudes. And of course, some section of Nigerians actually antagonized you and of course felt that such, attempt was just amounting to futility. But good to say the news is back again. How were you greeted by such news? And of course, what is your reaction as to the fact that your name, as you claimed, was carefully omitted without giving you due credit?
Okay, so first of all, the most important thing is that the verdict which has come from the judge, I think, is in line with best practices and common sense. Because my fear in all of this was that a terrible legal precedent was going to be set. But thankfully, the judge delivered what I thought was a commonsensical judgment. So that's the most important thing. Now, obviously, as you mentioned, some section of the Nigerian media decided that somehow the most important thing for them was to deny me credit or to try and write me out of my own story, which, I mean, good luck to them. But that's not really why we're here, and this isn't really about me, right? There's a much bigger issue at play here, and I'm just the vessel, I'm just the conduit by which this thing came to be. I feel like it's my duty as a Nigerian that had these circumstances to permit me to pursue this thing. It was my duty to do it. I feel like if you have the circumstances, you have the education, and you have the funding to make it possible to do something for your country, and you don't do it, then you are part of the problem. So I don't feel like I've done anything special. I feel like it's what I ought to do. It's my job. The more important thing here is that, as I said, a terrible legal precedent was not set, because the initial argument that was being made, and the initial argument that was initially sustained by the same judge, and the argument that was being made by the DEA and the FBI in court, was that even though this person is number one public official overseeing the lives of 200 million people, that those 200 million African people somehow do not have the right to scrutinize this person's life, right? Which, if that was a legal argument that had been allowed to fly, if that had been sustained by the court, that would have had so many implications and ramifications. Because there's a specific segment from the DEA's argument in December 2024, which said, and I'm quoting almost verbatim, I'm quoting this from memory. It said, while the plaintiff argues that the rights of 200 million Nigerians to know what their government is up to supersedes the privacy rights of an individual, what the plaintiff fails to take into account is that the rights of Nigerians to know what their government is up to does not extend to the right to know what Tinubu was up to. So in other words, what a US government agency was arguing in court was that 200 million Nigerians don't have a right to know what their president was up to before he became president. That yes, you might have the right to know what your government is up to, but the people in your government, you don't have a right to know what they're up to, which is a completely nonsensical argument to make. And if that had been allowed to fly, then the implications for future disclosures, the implications for public accountability would have just been terrible. So I'm very happy that that didn't happen. I'm very happy the judge adopted a commonsensical position in all of this, and I think we can finally start to move on from this trash fire.
All right, we appreciate your submission, especially considering the fact that you are not making this about you, in as much as you actually filed that lawsuit. In fact, you saw yourself as a vehicle or a conduit, as you mentioned. But then let's look at the law book, what it actually says, especially looking at it from the Freedom of Information Act. I have a lawyer right here who will be giving us perspective to this. Now, my question to you, Mr. Jide, would be, do we have a right, especially considering the fact that someone is occupying a very lofty position, the office of the president? Do the people under the Freedom of Information Act have the right to know the history and the real identity of who the person who occupies that lofty position is?
Absolutely. It's necessary, and it's part of the democratic tenets as we practice democracy. But you see, having said that, in this particular case, you also have what you call the Privacy Act that protects data. In fact, talking about the case in the United States of America, even if this information is released, how do we position it in the Nigerian law? If you look at Section 131 of the Nigerian Constitution 1999 as amended, that stipulates the criteria for a candidate emerging to contest for the office of the president. The age is age 40. You are expected to be a member of a political party. Then you are expected to have studied to the level of school certificates, except for now that there is a bill in the House to upgrade the academic requirements. And again, in the same section, let me go to Section 36 of the Nigerian Constitution 1999 as amended. In a criminal allegation situation, the accused, and now we call them defendants in the criminal justice administration, is presumed innocent until the case is proved beyond all reasonable doubt. You see, so these are the issues. Now, it was disclosed that Asiwaju Bola Ahmed Tinubu forfeited about $460,000 to the American government. That could have been in a civil matter. Has he been convicted in the US? We don't know. You see, and that is the delicate position that politicians occupy. In the case of Atiku, the issue of intel came up. In the case of Obi was alleged to have been held down in the UK to answer to some offenses. Even back to Nigeria here, I still question the system. In the case of Magu, the former acting chairman of EFCC, he was brought out of office on allegations of corruption. Was he ever prosecuted on those allegations? The answer remains no. So these are issues. And again, talking about our system here, the personality we are discussing is the President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. Are we now saying that American government will now pick him to go and prosecute him? You see, he enjoys immunity now. When the bill showed up in the National Assembly recently to deal with immunity, did not even extend to the presidential level. You know, it got thrown out. So until he leaves office now, of what benefit will it be to us? Almost all the leaders are suspicious in their personality and character. I remember at a point in time when a former chairman of INEC came out to say most of the people in the National Assembly are criminals. How he could justify that, I don't know. So these are issues. So on the scale of perception, is he of questionable character? Some may perceive him as questionable, you see, but I'm speaking now to law. Recently, the American government came up with an investigative report that US said was being engaged to sponsor Boko Haram in Nigeria. Has it been established? You know, so these are issues of law.
Okay. Based on the immunity clause that you talked about, that he has immunity now, and I wanted to make it clear to Nigerians that are watching. Let's assume that okay, he has immunity, and again, a person is presumed innocent until proven guilty. But you also brought the issue of immunity, which means the possibility of him being arraigned or prosecuted is not there, even in the US. It's not there.
I cannot say about US, but if you understand the dynamics
even
of
in
sovereignty,
the US, it's not there.
The American government cannot come and pick the Nigerian president.
Okay, but can they invite him?
He can be invited, or has he been invited? And please, on the scale of law is not something predictable.
Exactly.
Even many are still worried that Donald Trump became the president of America, giving series of cases against him and things like that. So who understands law fully?
Except lawyers.
Exactly. So if the American government is concerned, I'm so happy with what those who are driving that the Freedom of Information Act be fully implemented, disclose investigative information about Bola Ahmed Tinubu. I understand what they are doing. It's very good. I mean, on the scale of transparency under the rule of law, you see. But then there is what we call defense. When this matter was pushed at a point in time, the legal team of Bola Ahmed Tinubu proceeded on the scale of Privacy Act. Even the institution, you know, we are even discussing the issue of narcotics proceeds now. His credentials, the institution also came out to say there's an extent to which we can disclose. Okay. So these laws are there. You know, let's bring in an instructive case. Recently in the Guinea, in the Republic, Guinea now, this Equatorial Guinea, the report of one of the public officers there sleeping with over 400 women, doing the video recording. You see, I lecture on sexual harassment, so I was so excited. But when I started reading even the response of the government there, that they could not press charges of sexual harassment against the man because of consent from those who participated.
And they were adults.
Exactly.
They knew they were being recorded.
Okay. But now an issue now came, the issue of data protection. You consented to that ugly act being recorded, but should it be disclosed? So law is technical. But by and large, the stakeholders are questioning the character of the person occupying this office. There's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with that.
Are you saying, before I fall back to my guest who is on, Zoom, now are you saying that until the matter, the record comes to public domain, is something that we cannot say that is a prima facie case because we do not know if actually he was convicted in that particular crime as alleged?
Personally speaking, as a lawyer, there is one saying that assumption is the lowest level of knowledge. I won't assume. I'm interested also in these investigations being released. Let's read.
Okay.
In public
But the
relations,
presidency has already said
No.
that all information is already out in the open.
also,
in its defense, in
also
its
I will
response.
not fully move in the direction of the presidency because automatically the presidency should defend the president.
All
But
right.
if America releases these documents, then we can read and see. And even when I'm reading those, I still want to ensure that I fact check, which is important because in public relations, that's what we call advocacy. All right, and a lot of things fly online. So,
Okay.
on questioning the character of leadership to upscale the quality of leadership we have, I'm 100% in support of that. But like I said, let the due process of the law be followed. And wait, like I said now, some jump to conclusion and you said money was used to sponsor Boko Haram, but that news is gone under the carpet for a while now. So when allegations are made, they are not conclusive. You see, so that is why it would be beautiful if the latest move now in the US, in the District of Columbia, that the information be released. It's not appealed because that's another thing. It can be appealed against, so the battles are still on. If eventually these investigative reports are released, then we know what exactly went on with the investigations. Was anybody convicted and things like that? So
let's keep our fingers crossed as we wait for the release of this record. But now let me fall back to my guest, David. David, are you there?
Yes.
All right, so I believe you've heard what our legal luminary just said, but then let's move further into the discussion. You are also aware that a lot of Nigerians, when you actually, placed this lawsuit, they felt you were working for the opposition. What's your reaction as regards that before we take responses from the presidency?
Well, I mean, what else are they going to say? I guess in Nigeria, there's this idea that everybody has to be working for somebody. That there is no such thing as a Nigerian who has an ideological conviction, and that's why someone like me has to exist. I think because there needs to be visual evidence that there is such a thing as an ideologically driven Nigerian. That to the extent of spending my own personal funds to push this, even when there's really nothing in it for me as such. But because if I go out and I'm constantly talking about how good governance and all these things, I'm constantly speaking all this English, but where it actually counts, I'm not putting my money where my mouth is, and I'm not doing something. Then what's the point? So that's how I've always seen things. That you have to criticize by creating, and that you have to be the change that you want to see in the world. So that's the motivation. So obviously, some of the work that I've done has benefited the opposition. Obviously, it's the opposition's job to oppose the incumbent. So if some of my work has become a problem for the incumbent and the opposition sees that, it's well, good good for them. There's nothing I can do about that. And if they were to become the incumbency tomorrow, and if I was then in a position to hold them accountable, I will do the exact same thing. It's literally my job.
All right, now let's take responses from the presidency directly. Bayo Ononuga said this actually is nothing new to be reviewed. In fact, is already in the public domain for about 30 years. Also, Bashar Ahmed said this is actually a political game to distract, especially the incumbent, from focusing on delivering the dividends of democracy. What's your take on that, quickly?
Well, Bayo Onanuga, as usual, is counting on people's credulity, right? He's counting on people having no idea what the issue even is. What he's referring to as something that has been in the public domain for over 30 years was a sworn affidavit from the Internal Revenue Service in the US. This has nothing to do with that. This is a disclosure from primarily from the FBI and DEA. These have not been in the public domain at all. The first time anyone has ever seen any of those files was in 2023, when during this same lawsuit we got these files partially released, starting from October 2023 to February 2024. And then, because the release was only partial and there were a lot of redactions removing the president's name because of these so-called privacy exemptions, then we went back to court and we appealed for a summary judgment to remove the exemptions, and that's the judgment that we just received. So that's the actual issue. So the documents that are then going to be produced are the same documents that have already been produced in 2023, but with all the missing pages and redacted information. So that's what the issue is. So Bayo Ononuga, as usual, is trying to deny, deflect, and dissimulate. He's trying to sort of play down the seriousness of what is actually about to be disclosed. It's his job to do that.
Well, why you think that that might be a subtle means of watering down important issues? You are, a party to that suit. What's your take as regards how soon Nigerians who hope to see that, dossier, as it were, be released, how soon are we looking at?
So, using the last time as a case in point, we got the joint status report on September 10, 2023, which said that from October, the documents will start being produced. And that actually happened. We started getting documents from October 31, 2023. So the gap between when we got the status report and when the documents came out was about how many days? That 50 days or thereabouts. So in this case, the judge has set May 2 as the deadline for the agencies to submit a joint status report. The joint status report basically contains the timetable for the release of these documents. So using what happened in 2023 as a guide for this, I guess we can expect to start seeing some documents from maybe sometime around July.
David, I put this to you. Can you honestly say that why the U.S. court chose this time is not for political reasons? Is there any sort of political undertone, or is there some sort of, will I say, some kind of movement, maybe a cartel, as it were, who are not so much comfortable with the incumbent government, as it were? What's your take on that?
I don't know what you mean by cartel, but yes, it absolutely is political. It's political in the sense that under the previous US administration, it was very clear, even to those of us who were involved in the case, it was very clear that every attempt was being made to frustrate the case, to prolong it unnecessarily, and to protect the the president. Um, Under the new U.S. Federal government, there has been a marked difference. One of the key differences that even affected this case is that, as you recall, a few weeks ago, well, a few months ago, the Trump administration went after all U.S. attorneys that were appointed during the Biden era. And it just so happened that the U.S. attorney who was defending the case on behalf of the Justice Department and five other agencies, a guy called Jared Littman, was also a Biden era appointee, and he was also caught up in that. So even our case was affected by the sort of political shift in the US. So clearly, to my eyes, what has happened is that there has been a shift in geopolitical priorities, both local and international, in the US, and that has made it such that the current US administration no longer sees any value in protecting this particular person for reasons best known to them. As to exactly why that is, you'll have to ask them. I don't know. But to me, it's very clear that there has been a political shift in Washington, D.C., and that's partly the result of what we're seeing now.
If these records actually come to light and eventually President Bola Ahmed Tinubu unfortunately is convicted, what damaging effect would this have on him, being the number one image maker, and by extension, if Nigeria is pronounced a narco state?
Now, first of all, I don't know where this idea of conviction is coming from. No one has ever suggested that someone is going to hold a sitting president to court or something. That's an asinine suggestion, right? The entire point of this was disclosure, public disclosure, to bring all of this into the public domain and make it received fact, received knowledge. right? For the purpose, whatever Nigerians then choose to do with that information is up to them. But the point of this was never that someone is going to extradite a sitting president, or someone is going to haul a sitting president into a court in Abuja where he has immunity from. That doesn't make any sense. So there isn't going to be any conviction. But the point of this is that in the court of public opinion, the verdict will have been passed definitely. And then, as you said, the international ramifications for Nigeria in terms of potentially being viewed as a narco state. Well, I actually think Nigeria is already, to an extent, viewed through those lenses.
Why do you
If
think
you've
so?
traveled this if you traveled recently with a Nigerian passport, then you would understand it, especially outside of the African continent. The extra, Nigeria has never had the greatest reputation, but the extra attention and the extra scrutiny that you get now is unprecedented. There are some places you try to travel to with a Nigerian passport now. You have the right visas, you have everything, and they just won't let you in once they see that it's a Nigerian passport.
All right, thank you so much, David, for giving us your time. We really appreciate your time. All right, thank you so much, Mr. Jide Ologun, legal professional, and of course, a public affairs analyst, for sharing your perspective with us. We really appreciate your time.
You're welcome.
All right, that's the much we have for you this morning, especially from our Lagos Network studios. We'll be handing you over right about now for the rest of the programs from our Benin Network studios. Do stay.